Hey everyone, it's Leanne. Welcome to another video on my YouTube channel. Today I'm creating a really fun pinata card. This is a birthday card for my grandfather, and I made my own spring using some items that I had around my craft room, so I'm going to show you how I did that. So I'm starting with this fun stamp set and die from Lawn Fawn. This is called Year 7. Every year they release a birthday stamp set for themselves and to commemorate their years, and so that's from Year 7. I also have the scallop rectangle borders as well from Lawn Fawn, and so I'm going to use the one that's a little bit smaller than an A2 size card here. I also have this sheet of paper from Lawn Fawn. It's really cute. It was given to me in a sample pack, so I'm going to use that. I'm going to use the stripe side. It is reversible, but I really like those stripes. So I'm going to use those, and then I have a piece of Nina Solar White cardstock for stamping, and I'm going to use Memento Tuxedo Black ink for Copic coloring as well. And I have an acrylic block to use with the stamps. These are my circle round blenders, and I'm going to use those for my Distress ink background. And so the colors I have here are Salty Ocean, Squeezed Lemonade, and Peacock Feathers. 3 really pretty colors. I think these will look nice on the card. I also have these 2 strips of cardstock, and I'm going to use those coming up. You'll see what happens with them shortly. So I'm ready to get started. I've punched out the border first using a mixed media cardstock and did this with my Sizzix Big Kick machine. And so now I'm going to do some ink blending on that bordered background. So I'm going to start with my Squeezed Lemonade. I did put a piece of just regular printer paper underneath to catch any overhang. So as I'm blending the ink, if it goes over the edge, and I do want to get it up to the edge, it just goes onto the printer paper on the background, so I don't have to worry about making any mess on my desk. So what I'm doing is just rubbing in circles gently, and the circular motion helps to make it blend more evenly and just kind of disperse more evenly across the card. Now I'm going to flip this around. I'm going to use a piece of scrap paper to hold down my project just because the Distress inks take a little bit to dry, and so I don't want to put any fingerprints on them, but I do want to continue working. So I'm going to use that scrap paper just to put underneath my hand so I can hold my work in place, and then work on the other side using the Peacock Feathers to bring that color in next. Now for the background, I want it to primarily be yellow. I want to keep it pretty bright and then put a little bit of color towards the one end. So as you can see, about 50% of my background is already yellow, and then I'm doing 25% or so in the peacock color. And then I'm going to come in with that Salty Ocean and just do that last 25%, just the bottom part, just to add in that last color. So again, I'm just holding that paper underneath my hand so I don't make a mess. The Distress inks take a little bit to set. They don't take too long, but usually a good 10 minutes or so, just setting them off to the side once the blending is done. Seems to be enough for them to dry. And then now that I've got everything down, I'm just going to go back over it one more time with the inks, blend them nicely, and get that gradient look that I want. So now I'm ready to do my stamping. I'm going to set my blending aside to dry while I work on this. And I'm going to use the Memento Tuxedo Black ink because it's Copic marker friendly, and so I can color these right after, and I don't have any ink smearing, or I don't have to worry about the stamp pad ink bleeding or anything like that. So I'm going to start Copic coloring this little guy. He's so cute. And so I'm keeping a pretty general color palette for this. I don't want to go too crazy with the colors. I want to keep an overall color palette that's very simple and not too busy or too many colors to be distracting. I do want to keep the focal point to be my sentiment and this little guy. So I find that's easier to achieve with a more simplistic color palette. And so the colors that I use in my pinata, I'm also going to use to stamp the candy that I have stamped out on the right. And so that stamp, as part of the stamp set, comes with those 3 candies put together. And then conveniently, the die also has those 3 candies set together, but when you pop them out, they all become separate. So it makes it really easy to work with, and it's quick to stamp too. So I really like how that's set up. Even though they're small pieces and you'd think they'd be tedious, they're actually a lot easier to deal with just because the way the stamp's built, they're put up that way. So I'm starting with the lightest color on my little pinata guy. I just want his face to be nice and bright and easy to see his features. And then I'll work in a gradiated kind of tone, going to a mid-tone green for that second piece, and then going to a mid-tone blue, a little bit darker than that middle piece for the bottom. And then I'm going to do the accent colors in a darker blue as well. So kind of working from my brightest, lightest color to my darkest color. And then for all the coloring, I'm just doing a simple base color and one shadow, color that's a little bit different than my base color, a little bit darker. And so here I'm just coming in. I just want it to look like as if the pinata is like a paper mache or a paper tissue paper, that it's layered and that shadow is just coming in from each of those layers from the one above. So now I'm coloring the little accents in the darker blue, his little snout, which is really cute, and then his little feet as well. I did have to pull the back cap off my marker, and this happens with Copic sometimes, especially with newer Copics that are full of ink. I found that my ink was starting to come out really fast out of my brush tip side, and so I found that if I pulled the back cap off, that let some air in and kind of distributed the pressure, so it wasn't all pushing ink out of the brush too fast. So now I'm just doing some simple shadows and blending those in with my base colors so they look nice and gradiated. And then using those same colors that I used to color the main guy, just using those colors in his tail as well. And then I'll just put some simple, real simple shadows on those, nothing too extreme. And then I'm going over the shadows on his head just one more time. They're a little light, so I just wanted to bump those up a bit. And the candies aren't very big, but I'm still able to give them a little bit of a shadow, just a hint. And they seem to be pretty good. I'm going to keep these very simple as well, not too many colors. This first set I'm just going to do all in one color, in this tan color, which kind of matches the background. It's a complement to the darker stripe in that patterned background. And then for my next set of candies, I'll do those all in the same color as well to keep them simple. So I'm going to do them in the blue just to pull out some of the tones from the main pinata, but keeping them light so they're not too distracting. So they're they'll become a secondary element because of their colors. So now I'm ready to put the dies on. I'm going to run this through my Sizzix Big Kick machine. And I'm going to use some post-it tape to put the die in place. I like to put the post-it tape to the outside of my project whenever possible so it doesn't make any marks on my printed piece or my colored piece when it runs through the machine. So here's all the elements cut out, and you can see how all the candies come out as individual pieces, which was really nice. And I only had to run those through once each time. So here's what I make. This is the spring I'm going to make for my little pinata. You guys have maybe done this. I did this in primary school. This was a big thing we'd do as kids. And so you just take 2 strips of paper, and I have just the ends cut off of an 8.5 by 11 sheet. And so I'm going to trim them down because in my example piece that I showed earlier, it's a little big. I don't want it that long, so I just need a bit of paper to make it a little bit shorter, but still get that effect. So I'm going to start this with 2-way tape and just put a little square on the end. And then I'm just going to put these 90-degree angles to each other, and then flipping it over, I'm going to keep folding them up over into each other, going back and forth. So then I just keep doing this until I get to the end of the paper. And it's kind of like a basket weave. You just keep flipping and folding them into each other, and it kind of seals it all together. And then at the end, you just got to seal the last piece at the top. So I'm going to use some more of that 2-way tape, and it's really sticky. This brand, this 3M one, is really, really sticky. It's great. And so that'll hold it in place, and I'm just going to trim it with some scissors and make it square. And then this is really easy. I have my spring, and it's got, now this is made out of cardstock, so it's a little bit more firm. It doesn't bounce too much. It's just got a little bit of boing to it. You could use different materials as well. So now I'm going to start assembling everything. I'm going to use my tape roller and just line the back of my card to begin, because I want to put that patterned paper on my cardstock just to use as my base for my card. So flipping it over, I'm going to use the lines of the hearts as my guide, and I'm going to line those up with the edges of my card just so that I can try to get the card as straight as possible onto this paper, and that way the background will match with the edges of my card. It won't be crooked. So I'm going to come in with my metal ruler and my X-Acto knife. I flip my ruler over because that way my ruler, the front of my ruler, can sit flush to my project and I can get the closest cut possible. So just trimming up the edges, matching it up with that edge of my card, and then I can make this background perfectly flush on all sides. So now that that's ready, I'm going to start building my card. And this is kind of just trying the placement of putting my little pinata together and the little spring. And so I'm going to work on building up that background first. So I'm going to do my sentiment, and I want to do something unique with the sentiment. I don't want to stamp it straight. I want to do kind of an arch over the top of the pinata. I really want to keep everything very symmetrical and the visual focal point being to the center, and so everything working from the outside pulling towards the center of that card. So by doing my text in this kind of arched position, it kind of achieves that and gives more visual focus to the center. So the good thing with these stamps is you can curve them really easily. And so I'm just using the lines on my acrylic block as a guide and making sure that each end of the sentiment hits that one line and then just arching in the center from there. So it's looking pretty good. I'm going to stamp this with VersaFine ink in black as well. I really like VersaFine because it's very good at showing detail, whereas Memento's good, but VersaFine really gives crisp edges. And so because I'm stamping on top of the Distress ink and I'm only using this for the sentiment, I think this would be a great ink to use. So I'm just lining it up and I have that all stamped on and it's ready to go. I'm going to wipe that off with some baby wipes and then work on the next part of the sentiment. So we have Hope Your Birthday and then I'm going to put that in the center. And then I'll come in with the last word, Smash, and I'm going to put that just underneath my pinata. And so again, having the text on the top and the bottom puts the focus on my little guy and makes him the center focal point. So now I have all the candies and I want them kind of floating around as if he's swinging through the air and all the candies are coming out and it's just a big party. So I'm just placing these randomly, kind of figuring out placement and where I want the colored ones to be. I kept the gold ones towards the top and then the blue ones towards the blue background. Now there's another little stamp piece of confetti, and so I'm just stamping some of the Distress ink around the background of that stamp. The yellow doesn't show up very much. You can kind of see it, but I thought I'd come in with the peacock feathers as well and just kind of put some of the blue around too. The blue's a little bit darker. I didn't want to put too much. I didn't want it to be too busy, but it just gives a third dimension to that background. So I'm going to take a quick snap with my phone just in case I forget where I put all of the candies. I can use my phone picture as reference. I do this quite a bit when I'm card making, just to have a quick visual reference when I have it all laid out where I want it, so I can remember the exact angle or position of some of my elements. So I'm putting my background here, my bordered background, down with some sticky tape. Just two-way tape, and I'm just using a piece of paper just in case my background's not dry. I don't want to make any marks with my hand. And now I'm going to put my little pinata guy together, so I put some two-way tape on the back of my spring. And I'm just setting him there. He's not glued down yet. I'm using him for position, so I can put the candies around him first. So I'm using some white craft glue with really small elements. I find it's quite tedious to try and use a two-way tape roller or any foam tape or anything. So I find it's quickest and easiest to use just some white craft glue and just put a little bit on the back of each piece with my X-Acto knife, and I can get those all adhered pretty quickly, and it doesn't take too long to dry. The Elmer's craft glue is really good and it has a really good bond. I've never had anything come apart from it. It's really good with paper, so it dries pretty quick too. I find that this actually works the best for me. And so I've got all those little candies in place and they're looking good. So now I'm going to put the pinata guy on, and I put two-way tape on the back of my little spring, my paper spring, and just push him into place. So now here's the finished card. It was so fun to make, and I just love the way he came out. Even though there's not a lot of colors, I still find it looks really colorful and bright. And I really liked the color palette for this one. Yellow is one of my favorite colors, so that was fun to work with too. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you're notified as I post more videos to my channel. Thank you so much for watching.